Things are getting a little crowded at the Flying Valiant workshop. Guess it's time we open up a second location. Well, hey there folks, Chuck here, and yes, we're getting straight to the breakdown on this one because I had no idea how I was going to get this kit on a turntable for the before image. As you may recall, a few videos back, I did a Dodge Charger and a Horizon Hauler build for something that was called the Skid 2021 project, and it was basically like SEMA for diecast cars. And it was a really fun event, and I won the People's Choice Award, which was super awesome. And part of the rules to that project was to basically set up your own SEMA-style showcase for your build and kind of a scene to set it in. So right about that time is when Chris over at SK75 Works had come out with these simplified photorealistic style kits, and I picked up a couple of them, and I thought for my ratty build I would contrast it with a mostly nice display area. At a lot of these shows they use clean shiny shelving to show off their products, so this seemed like a great backdrop for the kind of display that could be done in a large warehouse where the floors and the walls might be a bit weathered, but the display itself is nice and clean. So for this build, I kept it box stock. I didn't do anything outside of the normal realm of building the kit. I wanted to build it straight as it was out of the box to kind of show off these kits. I really like Chris's stuff. I tried to recommend it to people as much as I can, and I really like this kit because it does a lot for a very reasonable price. And it's something that a person who is relatively new to model building could accomplish fairly easily and have it look nice. He also sells these really cool accessory kits, tire racks, lifts, toolboxes, that sort of thing. So I wanted to add a few of those as well. Ready? Punch that subscribe button. Let's boogie. Something I can't stress enough about SK75 Works' products is the documentation is gorgeous. It's full color, it's very well explained, everything is detailed to the nth degree, the photography is incredible, it's everything you could dream of for a kit's instructions, and it always comes beautifully packaged, and everything arrives safe and secure from England, from Chris's workshop, and there's nothing quite like the smell of laser cut MDF. Chris recommends using wood glue or craft glue. Wood glue is kind of overkill for something like this, and I just happen to have a thing of Elmer's next to me, so I went with white glue. The only real gripe I had with this kit was when it came to cutting out the pieces for the decals. It was very easy to cut the registration marks off, so I had to keep lining the pieces that I just cut off back on to cut the perpendicular sides. Now, obviously, the solution to that is just don't cut all the way across. But that's not how my brain was operating that day, so the gripe should really be with myself. By the way, if you haven't invested in a steel ruler, it is a fantastic investment. It's very nice to have something that is perfectly straight and that your hobby knife will not cut into. Another thing that I really like about these kits is that the decals, however you say it, are printed on a very high quality matte adhesive. They're not shiny, and that's been my problem with several of the photorealistic kits out there, is it looks like it was printed on shiny cardstock. And when I talked to Chris about these kits, he said he purposely went with a matte finish because he wanted to have these things look like they're actually concrete or steel or wood that would not really have that kind of gloss to it. And because it's really high quality paper, it laid beautifully. The smaller sides I went ahead with regular shears on, and that worked out pretty well for me. On the garage door side, there's a clearly marked section that you lay over the garage door, then flip the piece over and use your hobby knife to cut out the opening. It's that simple. I also went along and made some incisions around all of the different tabs and slots, cut off the excess decal, and made basic slits in the slots, and then went back over them to push the paper into the slots, get a nice clean finish. And repeat for the other side. Now, just because the tire racks and the toolboxes were going to be clean didn't mean that I wanted the whole building to look clean. I wanted to make sure that the area around it looked lived in and matched the beautiful details that Chris had on the decals. So I used some tarnished steel to paint the frames for the slide-up garage door, which does open and close, and the girder in the front. In hindsight, I should have just spray painted the silver and then weathered the silver, but I'm still very happy with how this turned out. As I laid the decal in on the garage door, I painted around the outside of it with the tarnished steel so that it all looked like a single piece of metal. I then used Nuln oil to give a basic black wash over all of the pieces that I painted, and followed that up with some subtle dirt filter from MIG. I didn't want to go too crazy on it, but I also didn't want the metal pieces to look like, well, silver painted MDF. Then it was time to get our accessory on with the tire racks and the toolboxes. I started with the tire racks. Chris recommends that you paint them before putting them together, which makes sense because you get glue on the MDF, it will resist the paint that you put over it. So to get a consistent finish, paint everything first, then glue it together. In hindsight, I probably should have primered things as well, which would have made applying this color a lot easier. The tire racks are an interesting design. I like them because they're exactly symmetrical, so there is no top, there is no bottom. You don't have to worry about which way the rack is facing, or if you accidentally do it upside down, it's going to come out looking great. Once the silver was dry, I glued the door channels into the garage door opening side, and then it was time to bring it all together. I just ran a light bead of Elmer's school glue along all the tabs, glued the walls together, then carefully put the 3 walls in place. And a couple of drops for the trussing, and that did a pretty good job of holding everything in place. But while it dried overnight, I put a bunch of heavy stuff around it to keep everything square. The next day, it was time to do the toolboxes. And man, are these great little kits. They are fantastic. Again, beautifully documented. Everything is spelled out incredibly clearly. Other diecast vendors take note of how well this is laid out. I will say I went against the rules and glued first, then painted the toolboxes. Because they had such tiny pieces, I really wanted to make sure everything held together well. So I opted to glue the pieces first rather than paint and glue after. And it was time to assemble the tire racks. I will say it was a little trickier to assemble the tire racks because I had painted first, but I'm still glad I did it that way. Once I was able to get everything to hold together and be square, it was just fine. And rinse and repeat for the other two. Chris also included a lovely assortment of tire decals and some little rectangles to put them on to give a 3D effect on what could otherwise be seen as a very flat display. Being the indecisive person that I am, I decided to use blue tack to hold all of those pieces in place because I had the feeling that I would want to move them around again later. And 2 years later, they're all still holding on just fine. I decided to put the SK75 Works on the outside of the building where the garage door was. I decided to paint up the first toolbox and rinse and repeat for the others. I used AK Interactive Intense Red for the snap-on toolboxes and warm khaki for the wood countertops, and tarnished steel for the pegboard areas. I then did some dry brushing with a darker brown over top of the warm khaki to create a wood grain illusion. And of course, clean up the countertop with some black borders and give everything a shiny gloss coat. This is for a car show after all. Once the gloss was dried, I applied some panel liner and cleaned it up with a Q-tip. Oh yeah, these kits also come with teeny tiny little snap-on decals. Great little detail that I love that Chris threw in. I used Stuart Simple Mirror paint to do the metallic handles on all of the toolboxes and cabinets. And then it was time to figure out where everything should go, which of course is something that you could spend all day doing. I did a couple of test positions with some existing customs and made sure that there was enough room for a big rig, which there was. For the Skid 2021 photo that we'll see in a second, I used wheels and tires from my stash that are reserved for customs, but since then I found out that you can actually buy tires by the 100 over at AliExpress, and 100 tires costs about $5.90. So you better believe I got a couple orders of those. Anyway, here's the final photo. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with how it turned out. I love the trussing up front. It provides a really nice sense of depth for this build, as well as reinforcing the walls, but really makes for some interesting photography if you're doing a little shooting from above. And yeah, I think it photographs really well. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. As always, I want to thank my patrons that make this show possible. You can visit diecastmedianetwork.com to check out our Patreon page, or you can click the join button below. Both will get you the same behind-the-scenes access. Well, that's that on this build. I'm doing my best to get this backlog off my computer and onto the channel, and keep my posts as regular as possible. And I really appreciate you making it to the end of yet another build video. I'm going to close the episode out on a couple of photos of how the kit looks now in 2023 as it's sitting on my shelf and showing off some amazing customs that my wonderful friends in the diecast community made for me. As always, I want to thank you for coming along with me for the ride. So until next time, stay fresh, cheese bags.